I was 23 when I moved into the cabin. It was my uncle's place up near Priest Lake in northern Idaho. He'd stopped using it after his divorce, and I needed somewhere cheap while I figured out what to do after dropping out of grad school. The cabin sat about 40 minutes from the nearest town, right at the end of a gravel road that turned into 2 tire tracks through the pines. My uncle said I'd love the quiet. He was right about that, at least at first. I moved in during late September. The weather was still decent, cool mornings but sunny afternoons. I spent the first 2 weeks cleaning the place out, chopping wood, getting the old generator running properly. There was no cell service, but there was a landline that worked most of the time. I'd drive into town twice a week for groceries and to use the internet at the library. It felt good, honestly, like I was doing something deliberate with my life instead of just drifting. The cabin had 2 rooms, a main space with a kitchen and a wood stove and a smaller bedroom. The windows were old, single-pane glass that rattled when the wind picked up. My uncle had left some furniture, a lumpy couch, a table, a bed frame. I brought my own mattress and some books. That was enough. By mid-October, I'd settled into a routine. I'd wake up around 7, make coffee, read for a few hours, then work on small projects around the property. Fixing the porch railing, clearing brush. In the evenings, I'd cook something simple and listen to the radio. The quiet didn't bother me. I'd grown up in Seattle, and I was tired of noise. The first snow came in early November, about 3 weeks earlier than usual, according to the guy at the hardware store in town. It started on a Thursday night, light flakes that I barely noticed. By Friday morning, there were already 6 inches on the ground, and it wasn't stopping. I drove into town that afternoon to stock up, figuring I might be stuck for a while. The woman at the checkout counter said they were expecting another storm system to move through over the weekend. She was right. By Saturday afternoon, the snow was coming down so hard I could barely see the tree line from my window. I'd parked my truck close to the cabin, but by Sunday morning, it was buried up to the wheel wells. The power had gone out some time during the night. The landline was dead, too. I wasn't worried yet. I had the wood stove, plenty of food, enough propane for the camping stove. I'd lived through a few bad winters as a kid. The snow kept falling, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I'd never seen anything like it. The drifts against the north side of the cabin were over 5 feet high. I had to dig out the door every morning just to get outside. The world had gone completely silent except for the wind. No cars on the road, obviously. No planes overhead. Just white and gray and the sound of branches breaking under the weight of the snow. By Thursday, I'd been alone for 6 days. The storm had finally stopped, but the sky stayed low and gray. I tried to dig out the truck, but it was pointless. The road was completely impassable. I'd have to wait for a plow, and I had no idea when that would come. My uncle had mentioned that the county didn't always prioritize the forest roads until after the main highways were clear. That could be days, maybe a week. I wasn't panicking. I had enough food, enough wood. But the isolation was starting to press in on me in a way I hadn't expected. The silence felt heavier somehow. It was Friday morning when I first saw the tracks. I'd gone out to the woodpile around 8. The sun was up, but everything still had that flat, gray light you get after a heavy snow. I was hauling logs back to the cabin when I noticed them. Footprints, leading from the tree line, across my clearing, right up to the side of the cabin, near the bedroom window, then back toward the trees, but not to the same spot. They disappeared into the woods about 30 yards to the east. I stood there for a minute, arms full of firewood, just staring. They were boot prints, adult-sized, definitely human. The tracks were maybe a few hours old, based on how crisp they still looked. Someone had been here during the night. My first thought was that it was someone from the county checking on people after the storm, but that didn't make sense. No truck tracks on the road, and why wouldn't they knock on the door? Why walk up to my window and then leave? I dropped the wood and followed the prints to where they came from. They emerged from the forest with no clear origin, like whoever made them had just stepped out from behind a tree. I walked along the tree line for a bit, looking for a vehicle or a trail or anything, but there was nothing. Just unbroken snow in every direction. The prints that led away were the same. They went into the trees and then just stopped, maybe 50 feet in. Not at a tree or a rock or anything that would explain it. They just ended in a small clearing, the last 2 prints perfectly clear in the snow, and then nothing. I went back to the cabin and locked the door. It was probably nothing. Maybe someone from one of the other cabins further up the mountain, out for a walk, but it felt wrong. The way the prints just appeared and disappeared. The fact that whoever it was had come right up to my window in the middle of the night. I kept the fire going and tried to read, but I couldn't focus. Every time the cabin creaked or the wind shifted, I'd look up. The tracks appeared again on Saturday night. I didn't sleep well on Friday. I kept waking up, listening. But nothing happened. By Saturday afternoon, I'd convinced myself I was being paranoid. I even laughed at myself a little while I was making dinner. Just some hiker, I thought, or someone checking traps. I went to bed around 10. I was exhausted from not sleeping the night before, and I dropped off fast. I woke up at 2:47. I know the exact time because I checked my watch, one of those old wind-up ones my dad gave me. I woke up because I heard something. Not a loud sound, just a soft scraping noise, like something brushing against the outside wall. I lay there in the dark, holding my breath. The sound came again. A slow, dragging scrape moving along the side of the cabin, from the bedroom toward the main room. It stopped right outside the window, near the foot of my bed. I couldn't see anything. The curtains were drawn, but I could feel that someone was standing there. I don't know how to explain it. You know when you can sense another person in a room with you, even in the dark? It was like that, but stronger, more certain. I didn't move. I thought if I stayed completely still, maybe whoever it was would leave. The scraping started again, moving away from the bedroom, past the front door, toward the other side of the cabin. Then it stopped. I waited for maybe 10 minutes. Then I got up slowly and crept to the front room. I didn't turn on any lights. I went to the window and pulled the curtain back just enough to look out. There were tracks everywhere, circling the cabin. Dozens of prints looping around the building in irregular paths, coming close to the walls and then moving away. Some of them were right up against the foundation. They were fresh. I could tell even in the moonlight. And then I saw something that made my stomach drop. There were handprints in the snow on the wall right below my bedroom window. Handprints. Someone had been standing there, leaning against the cabin, their bare hands pressed into the wood. I checked the doors, both locked. I dragged a chair in front of the bedroom door and wedged it under the handle. Then I sat in the main room with the fireplace poker in my hand and waited for morning. Sunday morning, I decided I had to get out. I didn't care that the road wasn't plowed. I'd dig the truck out, drive as far as I could, walk the rest if I had to. I wasn't staying another night. I spent 3 hours digging. The truck was completely buried, and the snow was heavy and wet. By noon, I had it cleared enough to open the doors and start the engine. It turned over on the second try, which felt like a miracle. I let it run while I packed a bag with clothes and food and everything else I thought I might need. I got in the truck and started down the road. I made it maybe 200 yards before I got stuck. The snow was just too deep, and the road had drifted in places where it ran between 2 hills. I tried reversing, tried rocking the truck back and forth, but the wheels just spun. I was stuck. I sat there for a minute, trying to decide what to do. Then I looked in the rearview mirror and saw someone standing in the road behind me. It was a man. At least, I think it was a man. He was maybe 100 feet back, just standing in the middle of the road, perfectly still. He was wearing dark clothes, but I couldn't make out any details. The distance and the light made it hard to see clearly. I watched him in the mirror. He didn't move, didn't wave or call out or do anything, just stood there. I honked the horn. Once, then twice. He didn't react. I don't know why I did what I did next. I should have stayed in the truck. But something about the way he was just standing there made me angry. I was tired and scared and frustrated, and I wanted answers. I opened the door and got out. "Hey," I yelled. "Can you help me?" He didn't answer. He didn't move. I started walking toward him. I got maybe 20 feet closer, and then he turned around and walked back up the road toward the cabin. Not fast, just a normal walking pace. "Wait." I called out. "Hey, wait." He didn't stop. He just kept walking, and then he stepped off the road into the trees and disappeared. I ran after him. I know it was stupid. I knew it was stupid, even as I was doing it. But I was so angry and confused that I wasn't thinking straight. I reached the spot where he'd left the road and stopped. There were no tracks. The snow was smooth and untouched. I stood there, breathing hard, staring at the trees. Then I turned around and ran back to the truck. I locked myself inside and just sat there, shaking. Not from the cold, from something else. I didn't go back to the cabin. I couldn't. I stayed in the truck with the engine running until the fuel gauge dropped to a quarter tank, and then I shut it off to conserve gas. I sat there in the cold, wrapped in a blanket, watching the road and the trees until it started getting dark. Around 5, I saw headlights. A county plow was coming up the road from town. I've never been so relieved to see another person in my life. The driver was an older guy named Frank. He asked if I was okay, and I told him I'd been trying to leave and got stuck. He didn't ask why I looked the way I did. He just hooked a chain to my truck and pulled me out, then told me to follow him down the mountain. I drove straight through town and didn't stop until I reached Coeur d'Alene. I checked into a motel and slept for 14 hours. The next day I called my uncle and told him I was done with the cabin. I didn't tell him why. He was annoyed, but he said he'd drive up and check on the place when the roads were clear. A week later he called me back. He said everything looked fine. No sign of anyone being there. No damage, nothing. I asked him if he saw any tracks around the cabin. He said no, but there'd been another storm, he said. Anything from before would be covered up. I never went back. I drove up one more time in March to get the rest of my stuff, but I brought a friend with me, and we didn't stay longer than an hour. The cabin looked exactly like it had when I left. Peaceful, quiet, normal. But when we were packing the truck, my friend asked me something. He said, "Hey, is that yours?" He was pointing at the tree line, and I looked, and there was a piece of dark fabric tied to a branch, fluttering in the wind. It hadn't been there before. I told him no. We left right after that. I still don't know who was out there. The sheriff's department didn't have any reports of missing persons in the area. No one else in the other cabins had seen anything unusual. My uncle thinks I just got spooked being alone in the snow for too long. Maybe he's right, but I don't think so, because 3 months later I got a call from my uncle. He said he'd gone back to close up the cabin for the season, and he'd found something. Scratches on the outside of the bedroom window. Deep ones, like someone had dragged something sharp across the glass over and over. He wanted to know if I'd seen them when I was there. I told him no, and I told him to sell the place. He did. I don't know who bought it. I don't want to know. My name is Sarah, and I'm a nurse. This happened to me about 4 years ago when I was working night shifts at a care facility outside of Duluth, Minnesota. It was a small place, only about 30 residents, mostly elderly people who needed round-the-clock care, but didn't require hospitalization. The building was old, built sometime in the 60s, and it was in a pretty rural area. The nearest houses were at least a mile away. I'd been working there for almost 2 years by that point. I liked the job well enough. The pay was okay, and most of the residents were sweet. Night shifts were usually quiet. Most of the patients slept through the night, and my main job was to do rounds every 2 hours, check vitals, help anyone who needed the bathroom, that sort of thing. There were usually 2 of us on staff overnight, but it was enough. The facility was shaped like a long rectangle, with resident rooms on both sides of a central hallway. There was a nurse's station in the middle, and at each end of the building there were emergency exits. The whole place had this yellowish fluorescent lighting that hummed constantly. It was the kind of place that felt empty, even when it wasn't. In October of that year, one of the other night nurses quit, and they hadn't found a replacement yet. So for about 3 weeks I was working alone. Management said it was temporary, and they gave me a raise for the extra work, so I didn't complain too much. It meant more walking and less downtime, but it was manageable. The residents knew me by then, Mrs. Chun in room 12, who always asked for an extra blanket, Mr. Patterson in room 7, who had dementia and sometimes forgot where he was, Angela in room 18, who couldn't speak anymore, but who would smile when I came in. I had a routine, and it felt good to be helpful. Nothing strange had ever happened there. Not in the 2 years I'd worked there. It was just a quiet place where people lived out their final years as comfortably as possible. The night it started was October 19th. I remember because it was my mom's birthday, and I'd called her before my shift. The weather had turned cold that week, and there was freezing rain in the forecast. By the time I got to work at 10:45, the roads were already getting slick. I was alone that night. The evening shift nurse, Karen, gave me the report. Everyone had eaten dinner. Mr. Patterson had been agitated earlier, but had calmed down. Mrs. Kowalski in room 4 was running a low fever, so I needed to keep an eye on her, standard stuff. Karen left at 11, and then it was just me and the residents. Around midnight, the freezing rain started. I could hear it tapping against the windows as I did my first round. Everything was quiet. Most of the residents were asleep. I checked Mrs. Kowalski's temperature, which had gone down a little. I helped Mr. Bernard in room 9 to the bathroom. Normal night? By 1 a.m., the power flickered. It came back on, but 10 minutes later it went out completely. The backup generator kicked in after about 30 seconds, but it only powered the emergency lights, not the full system. So instead of the bright fluorescent overheads, the hallway was lit by dim red exit signs and a few battery-operated lights I pulled from the supply closet. I called the power company from the landline at the nurse's station. They said there were outages all over the county because of the ice. They'd get to us when they could, but it might be a few hours. I wasn't too concerned. The generator would keep the essential equipment running, and I had flashlights. The building felt different in the dark, though. Smaller somehow. The hallway seemed longer, and the humming from the fluorescent lights was gone, which meant it was really quiet. Just the sound of the freezing rain and the occasional creak from the old building settling. I did my 2 a.m. rounds by flashlight. Everyone was still asleep. I checked on Mrs. Kowalski again. Still okay. I was starting to relax a little. Maybe this would just be a quiet night after all, just darker than usual. Then, at 2:30, I heard a door open. I was at the nurse's station, filling out some paperwork by flashlight, when I heard it. A door opening and then closing. The sound came from the west end of the hallway, past room 12. That end of the building only had 4 rooms, and 3 of them were empty. The 4th was room 14, where Mr. Greaves lived. He was 91 and mostly bedridden. He hadn't walked on his own in over a year. I got up and walked down the hallway with my flashlight. "Mr. Greaves?" I called out. "Everything okay?" No answer. I reached room 14 and knocked softly, then opened the door. Mr. Greaves was in bed, asleep, oxygen line in place. He hadn't moved. I checked his vitals out of habit. Everything was fine. I stood there for a minute, listening. Maybe I'd imagined it, or maybe it was just the building creaking in the cold. I closed the door and walked back toward the nurse's station. Halfway there, I heard it again. The same sound, a door opening, this time from the east end of the hallway. I stopped and shone my flashlight down the hall. All the doors were closed. I waited, but there was no other sound. No footsteps, no voices, nothing. I walked to the east end and checked every room. Room 18, Angela, asleep. Room 20, Mr. Patterson, also asleep. The last 2 rooms were empty. I checked the emergency exit door at the end of the hall, still locked from the inside. No alarm. No one had gone in or out. I went back to the nurse's station and sat down. My hands were shaking a little, but I told myself it was just a cold. The heat was out with the power, and the building was getting chilly. I pulled on my sweater and poured myself some coffee from my thermos. At 3:15, I did another round. I checked every single room this time, not just the ones where I knew someone might need help. I even opened the doors to the empty rooms and shone my flashlight inside. Nothing, just empty beds and dark windows. But in room 9, where Mr. Bernard slept, something was different. The window was open. Not all the way, just a crack. But it was definitely open, and freezing air was pouring in. Mr. Bernard was asleep under his blankets, but the room was ice cold. I closed the window and locked it. Mr. Bernard didn't have the strength to open a window on his own. Someone else had done it. But who, and why? At 3:45, I was walking past room 7 when I heard whispering. I stopped. It was coming from inside the room. Mr. Patterson's room. I opened the door slowly. Mr. Patterson was sitting up in bed, facing the window. His back was to me. He was whispering, but I couldn't make out the words. "Mr. Patterson?" I said softly. "You okay?" He didn't turn around. He just kept whispering. I walked closer, my flashlight pointed at the floor so I wouldn't startle him. "Mr. Patterson, it's Sarah. Are you feeling all right?" He stopped whispering. For a moment he was completely still. Then he turned his head very slowly and looked at me. His expression was blank, empty. Not the usual confusion I was used to seeing when his dementia flared up. This was something else. "There's someone in the hallway," he said. His voice was flat, calm. "No, Mr. Patterson," I said. "It's just me. Everyone else is asleep." "Not in the rooms," he said. "In the hallway, walking." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. "There's no one in the hallway," I told him. "I just came from there." He looked at me for another moment, then turned back to the window. He started whispering again. I checked his vitals. Heart rate a little elevated, but not dangerous. I asked him if he needed anything, but he didn't respond. After a minute, I left the room and closed the door quietly behind me. I stood in the hallway, listening. I didn't hear any footsteps, no doors opening or closing, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Mr. Patterson was right, that there was someone else in the building. I went back to the nurse's station and looked at the security monitor. The facility had 4 cameras, 1 at each entrance. The feeds were grainy and they were running on backup power, so the images were dim, but I could see enough. All the doors were closed. No one was coming in or out. I sat there and watched the monitors for the next 20 minutes. Nothing moved. At 4:30, my phone rang. It was the landline at the nurse's station. I picked it up. "Hello?" Silence, then a soft click, and the line went dead. I stared at the phone. A few seconds later, it rang again. I picked up. "Hello? Who is this?" More silence. But this time I could hear breathing, slow and steady. Then the line went dead again. The phone didn't ring a third time. At 5 a.m. I heard footsteps. I was doing my rounds, checking on everyone before the morning shift arrived at 7. I'd just finished in room 18 and was walking back toward the nurse's station when I heard them. Clear, deliberate footsteps, coming from behind me at the far end of the hallway. I turned around and shone my flashlight down the hall. Nothing, just the empty corridor and the red glow of the exit signs. The footsteps stopped. I stood there, my heart pounding, waiting. Then they started again, slow and measured. Getting closer. I couldn't see anyone. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness, but there was nothing there. Just a sound of footsteps moving toward me. I backed up toward the nurse's station, keeping the flashlight pointed down the hall. The footsteps kept coming. They were close now, maybe 20 feet away. Then they stopped, right in front of me. I could feel it. Someone standing there just beyond the reach of the flashlight beam. I didn't breathe. I didn't move. And then I heard it. A voice, low and raspy, so quiet I almost didn't catch it. "Help me." I ran. I don't remember deciding to run, but suddenly I was sprinting toward the east end of the building, past the rooms, past the emergency exit. I didn't stop until I reached the supply closet at the very end of the hall. I yanked the door open, stumbled inside, and locked it behind me. I sat on the floor in the dark, trying to calm down. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the flashlight. I told myself I was being irrational, that I'd imagined it, that the stress and the lack of sleep were getting to me. But I knew what I'd heard, and I knew what I'd felt. I stayed in the supply closet until 6:30 when I saw headlights through the small window. The morning shift nurse had arrived. I waited until I heard her voice in the hallway, and then I opened the door and stepped out. She looked at me like I was insane. I probably looked insane. I told her the power was out and that I'd had a rough night. She nodded and said she'd take over. I left as fast as I could. I called in sick the next 3 nights. I told them I had the flu. They weren't happy, but they found coverage. I spent those nights at home, trying to convince myself that I just had a panic attack, that the power outage and the isolation had gotten to me, but I couldn't stop thinking about the footsteps, about Mr. Patterson's empty stare, about the voice. On the 4th night I went back. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to prove to myself that it was nothing, that I was just being paranoid. The power was back on. Everything looked normal. Bright fluorescent lights, the usual hum of the building. Corinne was there for the evening shift, and she seemed relieved to see me. She said everything had been quiet. No problems. I started my rounds at midnight. All the residents were asleep. I checked on Mr. Patterson. He didn't remember our conversation from that night. He smiled at me and asked me where his wife was. I told him she'd visit soon, even though she'd been dead for 10 years. Everything seemed fine, normal. But at 2 a.m. I walked past room 9, and I stopped. The door was cracked open. I hadn't opened it. Mr. Bernard always kept it closed. I pushed the door open slowly. The room was dark except for the glow from the hallway. Mr. Bernard was in bed, asleep, but the window was open again. Wide open this time. The curtains were fluttering in the freezing air. I closed the window and locked it. I stood there for a minute, trying to make sense of it. When I turned around, Mr. Bernard was sitting up in bed, staring at me. His eyes were wide and glassy. "He's looking for someone," Mr. Bernard said. I didn't say anything. I just stared back at him. "He walks at night," Mr. Bernard continued. "He's looking for someone, but he can't remember who." "Who?" I asked. My voice barely came out. Mr. Bernard lay back down and closed his eyes. "I don't know," he whispered. "He doesn't know either." I left the room and went straight to the nurse's station. I pulled up the employee records and started looking through the history of the facility. I don't know what I was looking for. Some explanation? Some incident that would make sense of what was happening. I found something, a death, 20 years ago. A nurse named David home. He'd died on site. Heart attack during a night shift. He'd been alone in the building, and no one had found him until the morning staff arrived. He'd collapsed in the hallway. The west end of the hallway, near room 14. I quit 2 weeks later. I told them it was for personal reasons, and they didn't push. I heard from Corinne a few months after I left. She said 2 other night nurses had quit as well. Both of them had reported hearing footsteps and voices during their shifts. Management had started requiring 2 people on nights again, but even then, people didn't last long. The facility closed down last year. Not enough staff. I drove past it once. The building's still standing, but it's empty now. There's a for sale sign out front. I don't know if anyone ever bought it. I hope they didn't. I grew up in a neighborhood on the outskirts of Spokane, Washington. The kind of place where the houses were built in the 70s, all split levels with big yards and chain-link fences. It was a good place to be a kid. Lots of other families, quiet streets, everyone knew each other. My best friend, Tyler, lived 3 houses down from me. We were both 12 that summer. It was July, and school had been out for almost a month. Tyler and I spent most of our time riding bikes, playing basketball in his driveway, or just hanging out in my basement playing video games. My parents both worked during the day, so I had a lot of freedom as long as I checked in every few hours. The neighborhood had a park at the end of our street, just a small one with a swing set, a slide, and a baseball diamond that the older kids used sometimes. Past the park, there was a dirt access road that led to a water tower. The city used it for maintenance, but it was hardly ever open. There was a chain-link gate with a padlock and a sign that said, "No trespassing." Tyler and I used to ride our bikes up to the gate and look through the fence. You could see the water tower from there, this big metal cylinder on stilts, covered in graffiti. It looked creepy, especially in the late afternoon, when the sun made long shadows. We'd always talk about what it would be like to climb up there, but we never did. We were too scared of getting caught. That summer, a new family moved into the house at the end of the street, right next to the park. We didn't see them much. The moving truck came and went, but we never saw any kids. My mom said it was just a couple, no children. The house was a single-story ranch with a carport and a big backyard that backed up to the access road. We didn't think much about them. It was just another family in the neighborhood. It was the 3rd week of July when things started feeling off. Tyler and I were riding our bikes near the park one afternoon when we noticed that the gate to the access road was open. Not just unlocked, but wide open. The chain was hanging loose and the padlock was gone. We looked at each other. Tyler grinned. "Dude," he said, "we should check it out." I was nervous, but I didn't want to look like a wimp. "What if someone's up there?" I asked. Tyler shrugged. "Then we'll just leave." We walked our bikes through the gate and up the access road. It was gravel and dirt, and it curved uphill through some scraggly trees and brush. After about 5 minutes, the water tower came into view. Up close, it looked even bigger than it did from the street. The metal was rusted in spots, and the graffiti was worse than I'd thought. Mostly just tags and curse words. There was a ladder that went up the side, enclosed in a cage to keep people from climbing it. The bottom section had a locked hatch, but someone had bent the metal enough to squeeze through if you were small enough. Tyler went first. I followed. We climbed maybe halfway up before I got too scared. The ladder was slippery, and I could feel the whole structure swaying slightly in the wind. Tyler wanted to keep going, but I told him I was heading back down. He called me a chicken, but he came down too. When we got back to the ground, we noticed something. Fresh boot prints in the dirt, leading from the base of the tower toward the access road. They weren't ours. They were too big, and they were definitely recent. "Someone else is coming up here," Tyler said. "Yeah," I said. "Let's go." We rode back to the neighborhood, but the gate was closed again when we got there. The chain was back in place, looped through the fence. No padlock, though, just the chain. "That's weird," Tyler said. I agreed, but I didn't say anything. I just wanted to get home. The next day, Tyler wanted to go back. I didn't, but he kept bugging me about it, so I finally agreed. We went after lunch, when the sun was high and it didn't feel as creepy. The gate was open again. This time the chain was just lying on the ground. We rode up the access road, and when we got to the water tower, we noticed something new. There was a backpack at the base of the ladder, a black JanSport, kind of dirty and worn out. Tyler picked it up and unzipped it. Inside was a flashlight, a notebook, and some granola bars. The notebook had some scribbled writing in it, but we couldn't make out what it said. The handwriting was messy, almost frantic. Tyler wanted to take it, but I told him to put it back. "It's not ours," I said. He dropped it and we started to leave. But then we heard something, a scraping sound, coming from above. We both looked up. There was someone on the water tower, standing on the platform at the top, looking down at us. We couldn't see their face. The sun was behind them, and they were just a dark silhouette. But they were definitely watching us. Tyler grabbed my arm. "Let's go." We ran. We didn't even get our bikes at first. We just ran back down the access road. Then we realized we'd left them, so we had to go back. The whole time I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see someone chasing us. But no one did. When we got back to the neighborhood, we told my mom what happened. She seemed annoyed more than anything. She said we shouldn't have been up there in the first place, and that we should stay away from the access road. She said she'd call the city and let them know the gate was open. I don't think she ever did, though. A week went by, and we didn't go back to the water tower. But weird things kept happening in the neighborhood. People started reporting that things were going missing. Small stuff, mostly. Garden tools, a bike seat, a lawn chair. My mom said someone had taken one of our recycling bins from the side of the house. The neighbors across the street had a hose stolen. Then one night I woke up to a sound outside my window. It was around 2 in the morning. I heard footsteps in the gravel alongside our house, slow and deliberate. I got up and looked out my window, but I couldn't see anyone. The streetlights didn't reach the side of the house, and it was too dark. But I could still hear the footsteps. They moved from the side yard toward the back, and then they stopped. I stood at the window for a few minutes, listening. Nothing. I went back to bed, but I didn't sleep well. The next morning, my dad noticed that our garbage cans had been moved. They were supposed to be next to the garage, but they'd been dragged to the back fence. He didn't make a big deal out of it, just said maybe an animal had gotten into them. But when I looked, the lids were still on tight, and there were boot prints in the dirt near the fence. The same kind we'd seen at the water tower. That afternoon, Tyler came over. He said something had happened at his house, too. Someone had tried to open their back door during the night. His dad had heard the handle rattling and went to check, but by the time he got there, no one was around. They found muddy footprints on the back porch. "I think it's the person from the water tower," Tyler said. "Why would they come to our neighborhood?" I asked. Tyler didn't have an answer, but we both knew something was wrong. 2 nights later I saw him. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the footsteps, about the boot prints, about the person on the water tower. Around midnight I got up to get a glass of water. The house was dark and quiet. My parents were asleep. I was in the kitchen when I looked out the window toward the backyard, and I saw someone standing near the fence. It was a man, tall, wearing dark clothes. He was just standing there, facing the house, not moving, just standing. I froze. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to wake up my parents, but part of me was too scared to move. Then he started walking toward the house, slow, steady steps across the backyard. I ran. I didn't even think. I just ran to my parents' room and shook my dad awake. "There's someone in the backyard," I said. My dad got up fast. He grabbed a flashlight and went to the back door. I followed him, even though I was terrified. He opened the door and shone the flashlight across the yard. There was no one there. "Are you sure you saw someone?" he asked. "Yes," I said. He was right there. My dad walked around the yard with the flashlight, checking the fence, the shed, everywhere. Nothing. But when he came back inside, he noticed something. The back gate was open. He always kept it latched, but now it was swinging slightly in the breeze. He closed it and locked it. "Probably just a raccoon or something," he said. But he didn't sound convinced. The next day, my mom called the police. A deputy came by and took a report. He said there had been a few incidents in the area, people seeing someone walking around at night, but they hadn't caught anyone yet. He told us to keep our doors and windows locked and to call if we saw anything else. That night, Tyler's family left for a week to visit relatives. My parents started talking about whether we should go stay with my grandparents until things calmed down, but they decided it was probably overreacting. I wished we'd left. The last time I saw him was 3 nights later. I was in bed, trying to fall asleep, when I heard tapping on my window. Light at first, like someone tapping with their fingernail. Then harder, like they were using something metal. I didn't want to look. I pulled the blankets over my head and tried to ignore it. But the tapping kept going. Tap, tap. Finally, I got up the courage to look. I pulled the curtain back just a little. There was a face pressed against the glass. Looking right at me, I screamed. I didn't mean to, but I couldn't help it. My dad came running in, and the face disappeared. By the time my dad looked out the window, there was no one there. But there were handprints on the glass, smudged and dirty. The police came again. They searched the whole neighborhood, but they didn't find anyone. The deputy said it was probably some teenager pulling a prank, but my dad didn't believe him. Neither did I. We left the next morning. My parents packed up the car, and we drove to my grandparents' house in Seattle. We stayed there for 2 weeks. When we came back, the neighborhood seemed normal again. No more missing items, no more footprints, no more tapping at windows. The police never found out who it was. The deputy said the incidents just stopped. He thought whoever it was had moved on. But I don't think they moved on. I think they went back to the water tower. A few years later, when I was in high school, I heard that the city finally tore the water tower down. They said it was a safety hazard. But when the crew went up to start dismantling it, they found something in the platform at the top. A sleeping bag, some old clothes, and dozens of notebooks, all filled with writing, names and addresses. Our street was in there. My house was in there. They never identified who the notebooks belonged to. The police said there were no prints, no DNA, just the notebooks. I moved away for college and never went back to that neighborhood. My parents sold the house a few years ago. I don't know who lives there now, but sometimes late at night I still think about that face pressed against my window, and I wonder if he ever found what he was looking for.